I didn't see all of these people before, but thank you. So we're going to start the report back. Shall we start with group 4?
Oh dear, that means me. Great, thanks, Divine. Okay, so admittedly, the beginning of the discussion was woo, because it was about a divination. Oh, help me. Okay, so we were talking about the production of knowledge, and I thought, okay, we're talking about cultural artifacts. So if we're talking about culture, we're talking about multiple identities. If we're talking about identity, we've got to remember we don't just have one identity. Every human being has multiple identities, despite what we've been sort of enforced upon us in the systems we've grown up in, etc., etc. This also got me to thinking about the lovely circle that Isabella showed us and that Alicia referred to, no, Alex referred to as well. And I came at it from a linguistic viewpoint because I've studied linguistics. So you're either in the center or you're outside that. And then we got talking about indigeneity and feeling uncomfortable with terminology. And I think that's about othering. So we have to be very aware of othering. So we want to, if we're going to work together, we need to be thinking about how we are together rather than I'm in this group and you are other and so I'm not going to listen, I'm not going to understand. No, this is kind of where the discussion went. I don't know if anybody in the group would like to add something, especially Adrienne, because the divination stuff was, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, Adrienne says.
No, Elliot had some interesting ideas about divination,
Yeah.
Actually.
Okay, good. So we're going to come back to you. We will leave it for now as a divine intervention. Let's ask Eliseo, thank you for rejoining us. Isabella is going to take over. We have lots of interesting things to ask you and all of the others, but Isabella is going to take over. Group 3, I think. I started with group 4, Isabella. So now we're moving to group 3 and then 2 and then 1. Since Eliseo is here. Group 3, report back.
Group 3. I think I was group 3 with, yeah. And so we had an interesting discussion. We were being very reflective about the projects we're engaged in that are funded by European funding bodies, myself, GCRF resources, for example. So the key issues that we were discussing were around power and the power of and the way in which we're constructing bids for resources that are already the narratives, the sort of the ideas for those bids are constructed from a sort of political standpoint. They're coming from government. So in the UK, for example, GCRF is funded through overseas development aid resources, and then there is an expectation for capacity building. The resources are quite centralized within the UK and very complex contracts then written with African institutions, which ultimately mean there's significantly less resource going to the African partners often. And so we were reflecting on the power dynamics within those types of projects, which very much resonate with the conversations we've been having, but the politics behind that's coming through the government agencies around what they can and can't be spent on, and how strict those relationships are, which obviously plays out in terms of partnerships and in terms of how capacity building is framed. And I think, I don't know if any of my other group members want to say any more. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, also, well, difficult, of course, to summarize a discussion like we had, or probably any short discussion on this very complicated matter with so many aspects to it. Anyway, let me make an attempt. We try to identify some of the key issues and big questions, and I think we probably came up with some. We started a bit with yeah, everything that had been said in the introductory talks resonated a lot. So it's very recognizable, and we tend to agree. Well, of course, there are limits to it and many debatable aspects to it still, but yes. But then, okay, what does it mean for practice? That is, of course, a very big issue. How can you translate these ideas and concepts in practice? And of course, then power relations and imbalances come into play, like what already was reported also on in the third group. But I think Isabella came up with at least one very important thing, of course, that which is, well, to substitute the developmental gaze, looking at it from a developmental perspective, to a more balanced gaze in which you approach things from a perspective, what does it mean for us, meaning all the partners on northern and southern sides. Almost everything has global dimensions, meaning it has implications in the north and in the south. If you look at that, it becomes common challenges, and then also that gives really a twist to the perspective how you look at it from both from the north and from the southern side. David Mickler, also in our group, said, well, he noted that we had some problems in the Global Africa Group itself from the WUN. When it started, what was actually the function of the group? There was also the remark that even the composition of the group, Global Africa Group, with 3 members from Africa and something like 15 from not from Africa. That already says something also about the composition of the whole worldwide university network, of course. At the same time, it's interesting, of course, that we are now discussing this in the group, and that exactly this theme of imbalance and decolonization and those type of themes have taken center stage in this group, in the Global Africa Group. And we think that's a very good, very positive development. So let's continue that discussion then. And and then there was probably the last remark I shouldn't mention. I only started that, but probably there's still this need for knowledge capacity development, and well, that need is everywhere, but of course also in Africa, and probably you really need some strategy how to get there. How that, and so that's again the relation to practice. So we have this these concepts and the theory, but what does it mean in practice? How can you get there? The capacity development for a pluriversity, perhaps. I'll leave it there.
I have much more clearer answers to. I'll start from question 3 and I'll move up. So in terms of major conceptual ideas, I think we agree that the major conceptual ideas that needs to be further explored related to this topic includes issues of power. And sorry, my daughter may come anytime.
Thank you very much, all of you, for feeding back. I now need to, I'm very conscious of time. We've got only 8 minutes left. And I'm wondering what we do, how we best use these 8 more minutes. I mean, do we let things sink in and maybe just agree on next steps as opposed to having an open conversation? I think if I speak for myself, we're all slightly overwhelmed by the complexity of the issues that we've raised. They resonate, all of them resonate, but they are so complex. So I don't know. Quickly, Divine, what do you think?
Elisio, Samia, Adrian, and Alex, do you have last stuff you want to tell us? I mean, like we indicated, we want you to stay with us on this project right through to the end. So we really want you to accompany us through this project. We think we have started a very important part of disrupting these SDGs. And Elisio, I forgive you for saying that there's no colonial project. but it's a good provocation. So do you guys have last stuff you want to just leave us with before we move on and conclude?
Well, maybe for me, it is to encourage you all. I think these are, even though they are complex issues, they are timely issues, and we need to be having those conversations now. And we also would need to think of possible solutions. People are engaging with this at different levels, and if we can offer concrete steps on what could be done and done differently, it might then begin to shift not just the conversation but the action that is needed to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Eliseo?
No, I think it's really important to take up these issues. And one does not have to be destructive, but I do think that there are a lot of things which should not be taken for granted. And I think SDGs are part of that. As there are insidious ways in which we are constantly being invited to confirm other people's worlds. And I don't think we will make headway in that way, especially those us, we are academics, and our job is really to reflect deeply, not so much on the solutions, but on the problems themselves, because these people are asking us to look for solutions to problems that they have defined, but we should define the problems first and ourselves. So I'm happy to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Eliseo. Samia?
Yes, thank you. I'm not an academic, so I'm interested in solutions, and I'm interested in practical implications. And I think one of the things that I just want to share that was quite dominant in our conversation in our group was to actually use the Worldwide Universities Network and the GAG group as a case and to reflect on this process. Because here already, we identified what some of these challenges are within our own network and within this group, and to kind of really use it and reflect on it and share it. And as a practitioner, I'm not against the academic work and the problems, but what I want to say, and I think this is something that I also dealt with in my own research, and it links to what you said, Brendan, around whose knowledge matters, because it's not just academic knowledge and non-academic knowledge. And this is perhaps where I think, practitioners' knowledge is so important. Indigenous knowledges are important. The race and the gender, conversation comes into that. So if we look at it in inclusive understanding, I think we can bring all of these perspectives to the fore and have all of these voices heard, which is what I think would make this project really different. And important. And having said that, I think sharing it is also very important. So even for this group, Eliseo, when you spoke about your perspectives on development and on the colonial project and just raising these questions and putting all the speakers and all the breakaway conversations together and reflect on this, I think this is already rich. This would be a rich engagement to say, from the perspective of this workshop, these are some of the things that we've unearthed. And Isabella, you mentioned the complexities, and to share that with others, because we think often that these conversations happen everywhere. And in fact, they are not shared. They happen behind closed doors, like here, with a group of 20 people. And so let's think around ways of involving others in this conversation, inviting them formally, but also really reflecting on the process, and not only 2 years from now share a final product. That would be my kind of plea.
Thank you, Adrienne. Last, before we ask Isabella to close.
So I've had a few more minutes to think about the question of divination. And I think there's something really interesting here in divination and other religious phenomena, and that is that knowledge or scientific knowledge in a European or Eurocentric or Euro-modern frame is always conceived of as secular knowledge, because secular knowledge is assumed to be verifiable, is assumed to be accessible to everyone, is assumed to be objective, etc. While divination, and of course there are plenty of other examples that could be used, but raise the question of problematize that secular framework in which we think about knowledge, and raises the question of religious and spiritual knowledge, and whether or not our frames of thinking allow for that, and how we handle that. So I just want to kind of make that point, that I think when we talk about decolonizing knowledge, we also need to make a post-secular turn and really think critically about the secular assumptions that underlie our epistemologies.
Thank you. Isabella, now you can divine the end of this.
So you've just added another layer of complexity to all of this. Thank you very much, Adrian. I don't know. I think maybe the best is just to say that I'm hugely excited by the conversations we've had. I really think they've been so rich. There is definitely something here, as you say, Adrian. I think we have seen, the plurality of roads that we need to travel, or at least need to consider in going forward. We've taken one tiny first step, but I think it's worth continuing. I think all of you speakers are going to be with us. I'm just assuming that. It would be wonderful if you're with us on our journey. And I think we will just do what we said a few minutes ago. We will try and collate the notes from our conversation. We will try and distill some of the themes that came out, and we will try and convene another conversation in the new year to help us reflect on those a little bit more deeply, both on the problems, but also, and equally importantly, on the solutions, both within our Africa group, the WUN Global Africa Group, and beyond. So last thing to say is thank you to all of you. Thank you, Divine. Thank you, all of you. This has been really good, and have a good rest of the year, good Christmas or end of the year celebrations, a good start to the new year, and see you all in 2021. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah.